Let's now discuss this with Daniel Shaw, Professor of Latin American and Caribbean Studies at New York City University. Many thanks for joining us on the programme this evening. So what's your reaction to the Brazilian president's refusal to send weapons to Kiev?
Greetings, Nikki. Once again, we see Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, and we see the U.S. government through their mouthpieces like Bloomberg trying to pressure Lula in Brazil into taking an anti-Russia position. But so many of the exploited countries, from Brazil to South Africa to India, have refused to take an anti-Russia position, have correctly called out NATO and the U.S.'s role in funding this proxy war against Russia, with the Ukrainians being used as pawns to the tune of some $150 billion from our taxpayer money. And in Germany right now, they're even floating the idea of conscription. And you can imagine what a shock that is to the SDP leadership and the German people, with such a traumatic history of war in this country.
Yeah, Germany's Chancellor himself had also previously called for peace talks for Ukraine, but then later he flip-flopped on his stance and agreed to, of course, send these heavy weapons to Kiev. How consistent do you expect Brazil to be in that regard?
Well, Olaf Scholz is not very popular within his own party. Some 51% of the German Social Democratic Party were against sending the tanks and ramping up the proxy war against Russia. In terms of Brazil and Brazil's foreign policy, they want to maintain an independent foreign policy that at times definitely goes against Washington and what Washington wants. We saw this article in Bloomberg, and we can only take it so seriously, considering Michael Bloomberg's the 12th richest billionaire in the world, worth some $86 billion. But they certainly want to pressure Lula. They said that Lula is lost in this moral quagmire, and they used all this holy crusade language in this new Cold War. You know, you're either with us or you're against us, to paraphrase George Bush. And they're trying to create this war hysteria, as always, because we know who benefits from this war. It's the massive weapon manufacturers, and Washington, again, needs enemies like the U.S., like a human being needs oxygen for their lungs in order to continue justifying these wars.
Yeah, Latin American countries like Brazil, they've got a long history of disputes with the US and some of its Western allies. While Brazil is a close partner of Russia as part of the BRICS group, to what extent could multipolarity help bring peace to Ukraine, do you think?
I think that's what we're seeing, and I think that's the true hope, both for the Ukrainian people and the Russian people within Ukraine. There's multi-layers to this war, and the West were only fed one piece of it. But I think what we're seeing with the meeting of CELAC in Buenos Aires, hopefully we're seeing a new legitimate international community, because the international community, as it's called today, is, of course, only U.S. imperialism and its junior partners. But with Lula's leadership, with an independent foreign policy coming out of Brasilia, coming out of South America, from the BRICS nations, from the CELAC nations that met in Buenos Aires, hopefully we see a new international vanguard, which I think is really the only hope for humanity, because if it's up to the U.S., they will continue to sweep any country off of the map and carry out their macabre designs of neo-colonialism, anyone who refuses to be in their sphere of influence. So I think this is important, what we're hearing from the global South.
Well, Brazil is refusing to send weapons to Ukraine. The Latin American country says it wants to stay out of the conflict. Western nations, they're not really happy with such neutrality, are they? Do you think we'll see some pressure on Brazil because of this decision? And also, who are they to decide for countries like Brazil?
Exactly. Who is the most egregious usurper of country sovereignty now? Country sovereignties across the world, whether it was the U.S. war of aggression against Korea, or the genocidal war against Vietnam, the Christmas invasion of Panama. There's so many examples of U.S. bullying, and now they're trying to implement their will upon Lula. And Lula has said, we have no interest in war, we have interest in peace. So they're standing up and they're refusing to be stooges of Washington. And I think this flies in the face of a lot of the rhetoric, because it was very contradictory how Biden and the Democrats, the Democratic Party, as culpable of supporting coups across South America as the Republicans and across the world. And they tried to come to the defense of democracy, quote unquote, with this extreme right-wing invasion of the three major houses in Brasilia. But this shows that Lula is not afraid to stand independently on his own 2 feet in terms of foreign policy.
Many thanks for joining us on the programme this evening. I really appreciate your expertise and your insight into the matter. We've been speaking to Daniel Shaw, Professor of Latin American and Caribbean Studies at New York City University. Thank you.
Thank you.